pivotal event that's happened just this last week up in Canada that I think may be the absolute death nail to authoritarian governments and the pharmaceutical control over the world as we know it. It happened up in Canada. One of the most outrageous, unbelievable, sad, horrific, tragic stories that we've ever seen, especially for those of us that care about animals. This is what happened in an ostrich farm just this last week. Take a look at this.
Breaking news out of British Columbia.
The remote community of Edgewood, BC finds itself at the heart of a dispute.
Here at Universal Ostrich Farm, these roughly 400 ostriches have made headlines. They are supposed to be killed.
For nearly 10 months, owners of the Universal Ostrich Farm have been fighting to save their birds after 2 tested positive for avian flu and dozens died.
The CFIA's argument essentially has always been once birds test positive for avian flu, that entire flocks be killed to prevent the spread of the virus.
The remaining flock of 300 to 400 ostriches has been healthy for more than 250 days since then. And they claim the birds now have herd immunity to the disease.
We've been fighting for retesting. We just want an opportunity to retest these animals.
American radio host and billionaire John Catsimatidis, along with Dr. Mehmet Oz, now the U.S. Medicare administrator, held a news conference Monday asking that the FDA be allowed to test the birds.
People have traveled from around BC and across the country. They say they're here to protect the animals.
A nearly year-long legal battle finally ended on Thursday, allowing the agency to proceed.
The agency concluded the most appropriate and humane option was to use professional marksmen.
Right. 59.
Supporters of the farm could be heard yelling, condemning the cull.
The farm owners say some of the birds have been with them for decades.
This whole thing has been a masterclass in how not to handle conflict.
They come here, make a massacre of healthy animals.
What a lot of Canadians now see is they see it as government overreach. They see it as something that should never have happened.
This is one of the biggest crimes in Canadian history.
I'm joined now by Katie Pasitny, who works at the farm. Your mother, my understanding, owns the farm, so this is very close to you. Obviously, you're emotional. I can't even imagine watching this. What are your thoughts right now as you reflect on this horrific event?
On November 6th, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency waged war on our family, and they waged war on our farm in a peaceful valley with over 300 healthy, prehistoric, sentient beings that had names, they had personalities, they had been in our family for decades. They were our identity, and not one of those animals were ever tested. Not one of those ostriches that got gunned down by cowards in the middle of the night, not one of those animals had ever been tested. So you tell me how we get ahead doing something like this. You tell me, how does a family or a country come back from a massacre, a barbaric massacre like this, treating life like it doesn't matter, like heartbeats don't exist, that emotions and livelihoods of farmers that have dedicated their lives to, some of them nutritional food supply, some of them science and innovation, some of them they're just their pets. And in Canada, it's like we've lost all meaning for what life means, for what life is. These animals were tortured by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Our family has been terrorized by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency for over almost 11 months. Terrorized. There's been no transparency. There's been no innovation. There's been no willingness to cooperate or collaborate with us and work with us. A simple test could have stopped one of the most heinous barbaric acts against animals in Canadian history. A simple test. And there's no going back from this, but the one thing Canadian Food Inspection Agency did, they exposed themselves. On November 6th, Canada woke up the world, some behind TV screens and computer screens, but there were hundreds here that they will never ever, we'll have PTSD for the rest of our lives for that gunfire, that rapid gunfire, taking away lives of animals that were put in a kill pen and made to watch each other die, tripping over each other's bodies from the people. They trusted humans. We made them trust humans because we loved them and we taught them to trust humans. They were designed to run away from predators, running 45 miles an hour out of when they were afraid. And they would have been running in that pen, hitting and bouncing off each other. And instead of running from predators, they got killed by, I guess, one of the biggest predators right now is humans. And it was a barbaric, needless act. And as this story goes, we're getting people that are even phoning truckers that were bringing hay in our farm and finding out that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency was having such a hard time even finding that hay to build that kill pen that they used my name. They used my name to buy that hay, to build that kill pen, tricking people into thinking they were trucking hay that I ordered for bedding.
Wow.
And then that truck driver got here and he saw what the bales were being used for, and his trucking company said to get out of here. And the RCMP held him hostage here until he unloaded his hay.
Wow.
They say that this is about virus. If you watch every video for the past month, you will see that this has nothing to do about a virus.
Well, I mean, that's something that we talk a lot about on this show, and I think is what this story is really about, is what they've just exposed. This, it's not, what's it called? It's not the FDA and the CDC, it's the name of the group that did this.
Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
So the Canadian Food Inspection Agency essentially just showed the world that they are not a scientific organization. They use science to bring authoritarian, pressure and power upon innocent people. But it is clear, let's go back to when this started. 11 months ago, my understanding is a few of your flock contracted avian flu, which they've been trying to hype the fear of bird flu around the world as the next big pandemic. But you had a couple of birds get sick. Is that correct?
Yeah, we actually had 69 die.
Okay.
We were a flock well over 400, almost 500.
Right.
And then so what happened was more than 3/4 of our farm never got sick. And through our legal advancement that we've done, we found out that it started to make sense because more than half of our farm experienced these same symptoms in 2020. But those ostriches, we lost 10 at the time. We got a vet to come on board, and obviously we did our due diligence as a farm, and those tests came back positive for Pseudomonas bacteria, and that was done off our proper tissue sample test, not a PCR test. Now, speed up to 2024, we start seeing some of these same symptoms that presented themselves in 2020, but they were only identifiable and only in the ostriches that have been on our farm 2020 after.
Okay.
So that makes sense because our ostriches from 2020 prior had immunity.
Right.
So they weren't getting sick. Their firewall was active, it was working, and they weren't getting sick. So again, we contacted our vet at the time. It was holidays, so it was really hard to get a hold of him. And we were just waiting a call back, but we did our own quarantining, our own cleaning of the dishes. You start your own process being a farmer.
Yeah.
And then an anonymous call went into Canadian Food Inspection Agency saying they were sure we had avian influenza. And then that's where this all started, was we allowed them into our farm. We allowed them to take those 2 PCR tests and run them at 39 cycles. We allowed them to take our tests and go to the Abbotsford lab unknowingly that was an unaccredited lab to test for H5N1. And 41 minutes after that test result came back from a non-accredited lab, they signed our kill order. Courtney Fotheringham signed our kill order. Yeah, knowing that we had science, knowing that we had research, knowing that these animals were hit herd immunity, knowing that we were doing a great job here. We were isolated. We're not in a city or a major center.
Yeah.
We were no threat. They don't fly. And so they also had a 5.5-hour Zoom call with us, which was more like an interrogation. They wanted all of our science, all of our research. They wanted our business plan. They wanted all of our vets we've spoke to. They wanted to know everything. And after they knew everything, they still decided, no, we're not interested. They got all die. We went through exemption packages. We tried to do everything. But again, the CFIA was giving us exemption packages based on poultry, a commercial poultry facility, which we're not. The exemption packages listed turkeys, geese, ducks, and chickens. Not one mention of an emu, a rhea, an ostrich. And so we kept saying we cannot work with the questions. They don't pertain to our farm.
Yeah.
And they kept threatening, if you don't answer these questions, then you're in non-compliance, and they all die anyway. On January 2nd, we got a letter that said we qualify for special rare genetics. In 8 days, somehow we lost the qualification for that by just them deciding that they're understaffed and they don't want to take the tests. So January 10th, we were given a notice that by February 1st, we were supposed to kill every one of these animals ourselves and bury them in our hayfield. So from January 10th to February 1st, we were the experts in handling a virus, a supposed virus.
Wow.
But then February 1st, when we became non-compliant, then it became that we were non-compliant and, comply or die. And that's what the race that we've been in since January 10th. It's been comply or die up to this point.
And you've been fighting it for obviously months and months and months. We're 11 months out. So any issue that would have existed is gone now. If anyone knows anything about the science, and you would think we want to live in a world where, we've built herd immunity, where those that have immunity, which your flock clearly does now. And, if the thought was it was a wild bird, a duck or something that came in and infected your ostriches, it had its effect, but now you are holding down the future of health, which is all of your birds, if science works the way it has since the dawn of man and everything we now know to be true, these beautiful birds are holding down health. There's not another wild bird that can probably infect them for quite some time until a real, evolution happens with that virus. So none of this is scientific. So do you feel like they're just following through because they don't want anyone like you to ever resist again? Like, it won't matter if you ride us out. It won't matter if we lose to the science and the timing. Do you feel like you're being made an example of here?
Oh, yeah. They wanted to say that we were setting a dangerous precedent, that farmers would now start to fight their culls. But they were setting the most dangerous precedent of all, and you've just nailed it, is that antibodies don't exist, that natural immunity doesn't exist, herd immunity doesn't exist, and that is what they're teaching the world. And that is the most dangerous precedent of all, because by stamping out, it sounds really strong, but when you pair it out with stamping out natural immunity and humanity is at risk, it doesn't sound so pretty. And that's what we're doing. We're losing our generational farmers, our lineage, we're losing our genetics, we're losing our biodiversity in all of our livestock and our animals, and that is going to lead to a catastrophic failure of a chain of events. And that will put humanity at risk, and it will make you and me and my kids and my grandkids fully reliant on vaccinations for survival, because there is no more natural immunity. They want to say that this was about virus. This was not about virus. This is about a family that had a therapeutic advantage in the industry that would have made, big pharma, we would have put them at risk of losing money, and holding on to that tight threshold of vaccines for health. Therapeutics are just, it's a natural way of using the antibodies out of the ostrich eggs, that we have big scientific proof that their antibodies are so robust. And we have 100 chicken eggs worth of antibodies in one ostrich egg. They're prehistoric by for a reason. They have such an amazing immune system. And
so
then,
you were actually
again,
working, just because I read this in the article, and I saw one of the last sentences of one of the articles talked about how you were actually looking into the therapeutic value of these antibodies and these birds that are now totally immune. They're producing animals that are in the egg yolks of these ostriches, and so you were starting to look at, is there a natural way we can use this? Where obviously drugs wouldn't be involved, vaccines. I mean, I immediately just thought, this is where you've stepped into a danger zone with pharma, right? Now you're competing. Now you have a natural way that maybe we could look at. Are there in these egg yolks and these birds that have gotten through this? Is our future? Is there a way to bring them? Were you looking? Is there a way to bring immunity through these antibodies that are now being found, prolific inside of the egg yolks of your healthy ostriches?
Yeah, and we were at the usable stages of science. We were offering the Canadian government stockpiles of avian influenza H5N1 antibodies to begin to start to mitigate the risk that we've been seeing across the world, across Canada first, but to start to use these antibodies. And they said there was a no. So one thing where we go along the further though, there's so many things that don't make sense. I found that in March, so this was happening in January, February, we're disclosing all of our details, our research, our information, the importance of our antibodies and these eggs, and showing them our test results from a clinic in Quebec called Immune Biosolutions. Now, in March, while they're trying to fight to kill every one of our animals rather than keep them for research and collaboration and work with us, they gave almost $1 million grant to a lab in, was this one in Quebec, named Lafont Medical, to create one of the products that we said we were creating, which was a diagnostic test kit for farmers to use using antibodies. So while we were offering the collaborative innovation and the science for free, they went and gave a grant for almost $1 million to Lafont Medical, a private lab. So, here again, so now we're looking at our research going to be used somewhere. Again, I can't say that it's this is in our opinion, but at the same time, we're noticing while we were under a stay order of the Supreme Court, we were watching the numbers of our animals decrease in our fields, and we didn't know why. Now, some people think we're crazy. Canadian Food Inspection Agency said nothing left here dead. So the one thing that we can hypothetically guess at is, where did they take some of our older ostriches? Did they steal them? And are they in Ontario or Quebec? And do they have our lineage and our genetics from our decades-old, strong, robust, beautiful ostriches from around the world? Do they have those birds still alive? Because they would never, we even opened up an investigation to look. We wanted to count our ostriches. That's it. We just wanted to be able to go in with a vet and count how many ostriches were there. Canadian Food Inspection Agency would not allow us. So we started doing aerial shots.
So they were blocking
from
you from contact, like you weren't able to get into your own flocks at a certain point?
No. September 22nd, they came in with these warrants to search. And when they gave those to us, they took over complete seizure of our whole property and our animals. However, on the 22nd, we received an email from Courtney Fotheringham from Canadian Food Inspection Agency asking us as a farm to continue to feed and water the animals to support them, because then they would just continue on with preparing for the worst outcome. Now, we never fought them setting up. We were waiting for a Supreme Court answer. And so we were staying in the pens to feed them, but we were being told to get out. So my mom and I decided to stay in there and fight for the right to feed them and keep them calm while their world was going to turn upside down. And we said, just please let us feed them. And they finally agreed. We told them about that email. They agreed we could feed them. We go off in our farm truck and we are feeding for about a half an hour. And then our farm truck is surrounded by 4 police cop cars and a van. And they tell us that we're under arrest. So my mom and I were arrested for feeding our animals.
Wow.
And now they're trying to charge us with a criminal act under the Section 35, Paragraph 2 of the Animal Health Act. Get this one. Charge us criminal.
Say yes to the Capital One Guaranteed Mastercard.
That we're under arrest. So my mom and I were arrested for feeding our animals.
Wow.
And now they're trying to charge us with a criminal act under the Section 35, Paragraph 2 of the Animal Health Act. Get this one. Charge us criminally under the Animal Health Act that we were impeding an officer from doing their duties.
Wow. It's absolutely you can't, it's horrible. I mean, I don't want to make it political, but, you know, I went to film school up in Vancouver, and I remember years and years ago just thinking, wow, you know, it's beautiful. Socialism looks like it works. And now I will say we are seeing, and all through COVID we saw this, how few rights you have in Canada. When an authoritarian government decides it's right, it can take 2 PCR tests and destroy a livelihood, a living, a family, and perhaps even the future of science as we know it, an investigation, and that's what's happened here. So take me to November 3rd, I think you said it is. What was that day like as it's become clear? I mean, were you aware that there's just no stopping? At what point did you know we've lost this, they're coming in, they're going to kill our birds?
It was November 6th morning.
On number 6,
and
okay.
we got our decision from Supreme Court that they decided to not hear our case. And at that moment, we knew that there was no stopping. We asked them if we could say goodbye to our animals, and they said no. We asked them after they barbarically gunned them down if we could pray over them, and they said no. Their reason being, they said that they were scared. They were scared from us. And we said, could you imagine how every one of these animals felt in the middle of the night when the gunshots started in the dark? They were supposed to be resting. And instead they were running into one another, watching their brothers and sisters die that they've been with for 30 years. And they were looking for humans to protect them because, like I said, we taught them that humans were safe. And we taught them that they could trust us. And they murdered my mom's identity that night. They murdered our family's identity that night. And they've scarred a world forever. We have calls coming from all over the world that watched that. And everybody agrees that maybe God just needed to take home one of the biggest sacrifices to make one of the biggest changes in the world, because we need to start to lead this world by compassion. We need to start to bring back conscience, and we have to bring back unity. And the one best thing to do that is animals, because I think everybody can agree that no animal deserves to be get barbarically gunned down in the middle of the night. And we can be their voices. And by their heinous, this act, this murder that happened on our farm with those bullets ringing out in the middle of the night, 900 to 1,000 gunshots. We'll never sleep without thinking of what that sounded like. So they didn't even warn us. The RCMP didn't warn us it was going to start. They trapped our supporters up on the highway, wouldn't let them back down our road to get to their motorhomes so that they could go and they didn't have to listen to it. They trapped them for hours on the highway listening to the birds running and gunshots. This is something that will never go away. And I pray that the world never forgets about what happened November 6th, because this has to change how we see leadership, how we display humanity. And we have such a big opportunity here with the world be such a vulnerable space to create true leadership and bring true leadership forward. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency had to come back in the morning. Those professional marksmen, they call themselves, they had to come back in the morning and finish shooting a couple of our ostriches that laid there in pain all night. We heard the gunshots ourselves. They're lying, and they say that they didn't. They lie. That's what they do the best. They lie and kill. Canadian Food Inspection Agency lies and kills. They do not tell the truth. They are not transparent. They do not heal. They do not protect.